primary difference between a body that's living and a body that's dead is consciousness. So what's allowing the body to change is the consciousness inside the body. And that's why from childhood to manhood to old age to dwindling, there's a single observer inside the body. There's someone that is there within inside the body that is observing the body that's changing. And that person is staying the same. So, but the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes to the body and mind. That is the difference between matter and spirit. So this is what the Bhagavad Gita is actually teaching. That knowledge means to understand the difference between matter and spirit and the controller of both. Bhumir napanalo vayu kaham manabhura evacha ahankara ityame binam prakritirashata. That there's an inferior energy, apara prakriti, an inferior energy of Krishna. And there's a superior energy. That superior energy is described by Krishna as apareyam idastvanyam prakritim vidimepuram jiva bhuta mahabaho yaidam darate jagat. That beyond this inferior material energy, there is a superior spiritual energy. And that spiritual energy is classified as the jivas, or the para prakriti. So the jivas, the living entities, who are particles of consciousness, are illuminating this material body and giving it life, which is allowing the body to change in different phases. It's just like when you buy a car. When you buy a car, initially it's fresh and new. And then gradually, slowly, it begins to dwindle. So in the same way, the body begins to change over time. It grows, and then it gradually decays. And you can see this changing of bodies taking place within all existence. You see it happening within trees. You can see it happening in fruit. You can see it practically happening everywhere. That everything is constantly changing. But what's allowing that change to take place is due to the presence of consciousness. Anywhere there's consciousness, anything in this world, Krishna explains, is simply a combination of these two energies. It's a combination of matter and spirit. And so when one can clearly see the distinction between matter and spirit, then they can begin to ascertain what is that thing that's existing through all phases. So for instance, in gold, the beginning, or this brass metal. Bell metal comes from a combination of copper, tin, and what's some other metals that's inside of it? Brass. There's a few different types of metals inside of it. Now, in its base stage, all the metals are in a very raw form, correct? But then they become transformed, and then they become these kartals. But in due course of time, these will also begin to deteriorate. But the metal will still be existing there, correct? So in the same way, the body develops, but it's just a combination of different material elements. And when that body dwindles, it will also just be a combination of material elements. So what is that thing which is consistent inside of the body? That thing which is consistent inside the body is consciousness. So the consciousness of the living entity is a thing that's of actual value. If we don't give attention to who we are as conscious beings, then we'll miss the point of life actually. Because we won't be able to develop a substantial sense of purpose in life. So that is the difference between matter and spirit. By nature, the body is ever changing, the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of the truth, both impersonalists and personalists. In the Vishnu Purana, it is stated that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illuminated spiritual existence. Jyotismi Vishnur Bhuvanani Vishnuhu. The words existence and non-existence refer only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all seers of truth. So everything in existence is just a combination of spirit and matter. One who knows how to distinguish between these two and then capture the essence of what's within these two is known as a tattvadarshini. He's a tattvadarshini. He can see what the truth is. He can go beyond what this so-called shadow of material existence is and see the actual substance. So this material body is like a shadow of our spiritual consciousness. And it's reflected through the medium of our false ego. So the body is just a combination of different material elements with a particular disposition for trying to enjoy the material energy according to how it's tried to enjoy in a previous state. So it's explained, Shariram yadavapnoti yashchamiya krama ishvaraha grihi vaitani samyanti vayor gata ivashaya. That this conception of life which one is carrying it from one life to the next life, to the next life, to the next life. And it is ultimately producing various flavors of existence based on how one's associated with the world. Just like if wind passes over a flower, it captures the essence of that flower through the smell, and it carries that smell to another place. So similarly, at the time of death, whatever the state of consciousness that one has, whatever the desires one has cultivated with the particular body that they've been awarded by the material energy provides them a body through karmanam devanethrena, through the arrangement of the divine, through the arrangement of higher entities. A body is rewarded. And then the result is sotram chakshus prasanam scha rasanam griham evacha adittasya manasaschayam visayam upasevate. That according to how you've associated in the past, you're awarded a particular type of nose, your particular sense of touch, a particular sense of sight, a particular sense of taste. According to the quality of interaction you've had previously, you'll be attracted to that same quality of interaction in the next life. So this is going on life after life after life after life. And this is all going on due to lack of knowledge of who we are spiritually. Due to trying to find relationship within the realm of that which is non-existent. We're carrying this conception of life over and over and over again. So one tries to have a family, one tries to, have a job, one tries to enjoy in a particular way, and then the quality of that interaction, depending on what kind of modality of consciousness it was associated with, one carries that modality of consciousness to another life. So if one is simply just living like an animal, in the next life one will take birth as an animal. But if one learns to cultivate divine relationships, if one learns how to cultivate a relationship by which establishing will never be lost, one can go beyond this material body. Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tajantante kalevaram tam tam meveti kaunteya tat bhava bhavivavitara. That according to the bhava of the feeling of consciousness that one has, that state one will surely attain. So the human form of life is specifically designated for the purpose of cultivating awareness of who we are as conscious entities. It's not meant simply for functioning on the basis of the needs of the material body. We create material relationships in this world because we have a material conception of who we are. So Krishna consciousness means developing a spiritual conception of who we are. This is the beginning of instruction this is the beginning of the instruction by the Lord of the living entities, who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. Removal of ignorance involves the re-establishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper, the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada is explaining here that this bodily conception of life, accepting that which is non-existent to be existent, is defined as ignorance. And removal of this ignorance means to begin to become aware of who we are as particles of consciousness and who Krishna is as the supreme source of consciousness. So this requires that we utilize our intelligence. It's explained Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaityanam Eko Bahunam Yovididati Kaman. That many, many, many particles of consciousness. We're all particles of consciousness. We have conscious experience, but we don't have complete conscious experience. We're conscious of our body, we're consciousness of the pains and pleasures of our body, but we're not capable of becoming conscious of the pains and pleasures of other bodies, or being fully aware of the existence that they're having. So we're a particle of consciousness. But that which is maintaining these particles of consciousness is a singular source. Eko Bahunam Yovididati Kama. And this singular source of consciousness is what's fulfilling the desires of all the minute particles of consciousness. It's maintaining these minute particles of consciousness. So the revival of that understanding that everything in my life is being maintained by this singular source of consciousness, that all my desires are being fulfilled, that all remembrance is coming, that everything that I'm able to do is simply coming from this original source of consciousness. This is what the process of Krishna consciousness means. And then simultaneously, not only to become aware that everything is coming from Krishna, that everything is flowing from Krishna. Upadrastanumantamscha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwaram Parameti Chapi Yukto Dehismin Purusaparaha. That not only is Krishna the proprietor, not only Krishna the sanctioner, not only is Krishna the witness of all activities, but simultaneously, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. Krishna is my well-wishing friend. That this singular source of consciousness is not just an impersonal energy, but because there is consciousness there, we can see through our own practical experience as particles of consciousness. That as particles of consciousness, we have an inclination towards activity. So that original source of consciousness being the complete source of consciousness, Om Purnam Adam Purnamidam, Purnasya Om Purnam Adam Purnamidam, Purnam Udachite, Purnasya Purnam Alaya, Purnam Eva Vishishyate. That the original source of consciousness is complete in itself, and all emanations that come from this complete source of consciousness are also complete in themselves. So what this means is that anything that's within the realm of our experience is also existing within the realm of the original source of consciousness. Anything within and beyond our experience. So that means that because we're persons, because we have activity, because we have desires, because we have inclinations, the original source of consciousness has those same desires, same activity, same inclinations, but they're completely untouched by material qualities. Nirguna. They're nirguna. Nirguna means that there's desires, there's activity, but those desires and activities are not influenced by the material energy. They're completely pure spiritual activities. So they're purna, they're complete. Our existence in life is functioning on incomplete understanding of our own spiritual completeness. So because we don't understand the completeness of who we are on the spiritual platform, we function in an indirect way towards life. We function on the basis of the body, and this causes so many problems in life. But the original source of consciousness doesn't have these problems. So removal of ignorance involves the re-establishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by a thorough study of oneself. The difference between oneself and the Supreme Being, understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. So by understanding ourselves, we can understand the Supreme. In the Vedanta Sutras, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as will be revealed in the 7th chapter. Although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. So there's no difference in terms of the purpose. What's being said here is there's no difference between the energy and the energetic. What's being meant here is that there's no difference in the purpose between the energy and the energetic. They're both functioning for the same purpose. Anandamaya Purasya. The thing is that the energy functions in relationship as as that which is meant to give pleasure to the energetic. So just like a wife is meant to please the husband, in the same way the living entities are meant to please the Supreme. In this way there's harmony. So there's difference in terms of the capacity of the energy and the energetic. But there's no difference in the purpose. The only difference that arises in between the energy and the energetic is when that energy comes in contact with the material energy and becomes forgetful of its own spiritual nature. And so in order to facilitate that disposition, the material world exists. But in the spiritual world, there's no such disharmony. Everything is harmoniously happening for the satisfaction of Krishna. Everything is taking place almost as like a musical symphony. Everything is completely in harmony with each other for the purpose of service and for the purpose of bringing pleasure to the senses of the Supreme. And then the Supreme reciprocates by giving pleasure to the particles of consciousness, the devotees who he's surrounded by. So this is the nature of the spiritual world. Whenever we hear about Krishna, whenever we hear about Krishna's devotees, we should understand this is what the reality is. And what we're experiencing is a reflection of that reality. But there's no substance in this reflection. Just like if you see a mango sitting in the reflection of on the water, and then you see a mango tree which is standing on the bank of the water. What actually has substance? The mango that's sitting in the reflection, or the mango that's in the tree? The mango that's in the tree. So what we're trying to find in this world through contact with the material energy is we're trying to find substance within the reflection on the water. But real satisfaction can only come when we look towards the substance. So that is what's meant when the Vedic literature is directing us towards the spiritual realm. That is why the Bhagavad Gita is being spoken. That's why the Srimad Bhagavatam is being spoken. That's why this poster is here. This whole poster is meant to show us where we're at. See this poster? This little we're just a little bubble on this. If I had a laser pointer, I would point to it. You see all these little yellow bubbles that are coming out of Mahavishnu. We're existing in one of those tiny little bubbles right in the center, on this bottom dot here. It's called the Mahatattva. We're covered over by that. And this realm is only existing for the purpose of facilitating the living entity's desire to want to be disharmonious with the realm of eternality. So this is the realm of eternality, and everything is going on for the service of Krishna. The topmost abode is Krishna in the spiritual world, and this middle abode is Vaikuntha. And they're just two different moods of service, but everything is happening for the harmony of Krishna. So actually we see in India that places like Jagannath Puri, places like Sri Rangam, places like Vrindavan, where we go out and they have these processions. You've ever seen these processions before? They bring the deities out of the temple. They happen frequently in South India. Anyone's from South India, or everyone's from Orissa? Orissa. Okay. So if you ever go to South India, in Sri Rangam, they have these daily processions in the temple, in the temple grounds. They bring the deities off the altar, they put them on a palanquin, and everyone performs kirtan for the pleasure of the deities. Prasadam is being distributed, and you see that everyone is feeling joyful, everyone is smiling, everyone is happy. This is meant to give us a window into what the spiritual world is. So ISKCON is a window into the spiritual world. The activities that you see happening in Kirtan, the activities that you see happening on the altar, these are all the activities that are taking place in the spiritual world, but they're being done in a mood of practice. We're preparing ourselves to go back home, back to Godhead. We're practicing by engaging in the activities with this material body. In a mood of service, we're preparing our consciousness for entering into that harmonious realm of service. So we have to utilize this life that we've been given for the purpose of cultivating complete knowledge of Krishna, complete knowledge of who we are as consciousness. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, and as in the case of the master and servant, or the teacher and the taught, such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance. And to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches the Bhagavad Gita, enlightenment of all living entities for all time. So to understand the ultimate source of happiness, one has to thoroughly study the Bhagavad Gita. When one makes a thorough study of the Bhagavad Gita and gives their entire life to applying it and studying it, one can clearly begin to understand that I'm not this material body. And then when one begins to apply the most essential instruction of Bhagavad Gita, Manmana mamad bhakto majagi mam namaskaru mame vaishashi yukvainam atmanama parayana. What we've been speaking about mostly is what is known as jnana, or sankhya. We're dividing the different material elements and showing how there's a clear categorical difference between material energy and spiritual energy. But when one goes beyond this stage of jnana, when one goes beyond this stage of sankhya, and they accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, after many, many lives, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyante, the ultimate conclusion is Vasudevam Savaramiti Sa Mahatma Sadurlava. That Vasudeva, Krishna is everything. So one who has accepted that Krishna is everything, the instruction which Krishna gives them in the Bhagavad Gita is the sunam bonam, the ultimate instruction of all spiritual instructions. And that instruction is to engage your mind in remembering Krishna. And this remembrance of Krishna comes about by chanting Krishna's names. The holy name is the most complete process for remembering Krishna. It's the most complete process for worshipping Krishna. Samyak Kirtan. It's the complete process for engaging in self-realization for this age. So when one is thoroughly convinced on the platform of the intelligence, through understanding the difference between matter and spirit, then one can begin to worship the source of all consciousness through the chanting of Hare Krishna. And one comes in direct contact with that source of all consciousness. And through chanting of Hare Krishna, the consciousness begins to clean. Cheto, Darpana, Marjana. And when the consciousness is fully cleansed, one sees themselves in relationship to Krishna in full. One sees that they have nothing to do with this material body, and that their true existence is completely spiritual. And that their true existence is full of conscious spiritual energy. There's no trace of material iniquity. There's no trace of material designation. There's no sense of belonging to this country, that country, this religion, this state. None of that. The only thing that exists is Jivera Surupoi Krishna Nityadas, that I am an eternal servant of Krishna. So the conclusion of all spiritual teachings of every religion in the world is simply this: that you're not the body, you are an eternal particle of consciousness, and your natural identity is to be a servant of Krishna. And you can align with that nature of being a servant of Krishna by remembering Krishna through the worship, through the chanting of His holy names. So when one understands this, their life can be very simple. Those who fail to understand this have to continue to struggle with the difficulties that come along with accepting a material body. It's said that there's klesha deha. This is a body of misery, kleshas. Adhyatmika, adhibodhika, adhidevika. Adhyatmika means difficulty that comes from our own mind and from our own body. We have so many difficulties that come from our body. Birth, death, old age, disease, mental problems, mental anxiety, fearfulness. And then simultaneously we have difficulties that are coming from other living entities. Animals, mosquitoes, so many different living entities. Our parents, wife, whoever it may be. Other living entities are causing us problems. And then adidaivika. So many problems are coming due to natural elements, higher powers. The demigods send forth disease. The demigods send forth rains, fire, heat, excessive cold and heat. All of these sufferings are coming. But one can become completely transcendental to all of these sufferings when they learn to detach themselves from their material mind. And this detachment from the material mind comes through the process of chanting Hare Krishna. Because it brings one beyond the platform of the mind, it brings one beyond the platform of the intellect, and it brings them to the complete state of spiritual awareness. Hare Krishna. So, we didn't really have a lot of time. We only had a half hour. And I wanted to do an activity with everyone, but somehow our day kind of went a little bit.
Can we do this Bharat?
It takes a long. It requires the whole session in order to do it. We would have had to start at like 7 in order to do it, because it takes quite a bit of time to go through.